They say some sounds are born of the woods themselves. Not a bird, not a beast, but a memory of a hunger so profound, it never died. In the deep timber of the Dungarvon, they warn you not to listen for the cry that sounds like a man being torn apart. Because if you hear it, it has already smelled the fire on your skin. This story doesn't belong to me. It was told to me by an old riverman on the Miramichi. His eyes as dark as the water at midnight. He said it happened in the winter of 1878 at a remote camp on the Dungarvon River. The name of the camp and the men in it have been lost, but the story remains. They took on a new cook that season, a young Irish boy, strong and cheerful. He was said to have a roll of money on him, saved from a summer's work downriver. He was proud of it, spoke of going home to a sweetheart in Cork. The foreman, a grim man named Brennan, warned him to keep quiet about it. But youth is a currency that spends easy, and believes in no debt. It was on a night like this, the air so cold it felt solid in your lungs, that the boy was left alone in the camp. The others had gone to a neighboring camp for a poker game, all but the foreman, Brennan, who claimed to have a bad leg. The men returned just before dawn, their breath plumbing in the lantern light. They found the cabin door locked from the inside, and from the woods around them, a new sound. It wasn't a wolf, it wasn't a cat, it was a cry that seemed to suck the warmth from the world. A long, rising whoop that broke into a sound like a man being strangled with his own last breath. They forced the door. The fire was dead. The cabin was freezing, and the boy was gone. His bed was torn apart. His little pouch of coins was missing from under his pillow, and on the rough plank floor, leading from his cot to the hearth, was a dark, sticky trail. But it didn't lead outside. It ended at the fireplace, as if something had been dragged up the chimney. The men turned to Brennan. His face was the color of old snow. He pointed a trembling finger at the dead fire. It came down from the black. He whispered. It was all teeth and shadow. It had sniffed the air. It smelled the boy's money. It smelled his fear, and it just took him. As he spoke, the cry came again. Not from the woods. This time, it came from directly above them, from the roof. And in the terrible silence that followed, one of the men swore he heard another sound, just beneath the fading laughter. The faint, metallic jingle of coins. The men buried an empty coffin. Brennan disappeared a week later. Some say he jumped from a logjam, others that he just walked into the woods and never came out. The whooper never left. To this day, hunters and hikers report hearing it. They say it's the ghost of the murdered cook, forever crying out. But the old riverman, he told me a different theory. He said the cry isn't a ghost of what was. It's the sound of what is. A thing that is still there. A thing that remembers the taste of that young, warm life. A thing that is always hungry. So if you ever find yourself camping near the Dungarvon, and the fire dies down to embers, listen to the dark between the trees. What you hear isn't a memory, it's an invitation. You heard it, didn't you? That space between the wind that isn't empty. The story of the missing cook, and the foreman's guilt is just the first verse. The true horror of the Dungarvon isn't a single ghost, it's a cycle, an appetite that has been fed, and now expects to be fed again. Most who hear the cry are just passing through, a story to tell back home. But for some, the woods don't let go so easily. In the summer of 2019, two university students, Leah and Mark, decided to document the legend. They weren't just hiking, they were hunting for proof. They thought it was a game, a ritual to summon a story. They didn't understand that some stories are waiting to be invited in. It was in the audio, a sound she hadn't heard with her own ears. On the recording, beneath the sound of her jingling the coins, was something else. A faint, wet, rhythmic sound. Like breathing. That's the first rule the woods break. They teach you the sound of silence, and then they show you that you were wrong, that it was never silent at all. She woke Mark. They argued in hushed, frantic tones. He said it was pareidolia, the mind hearing patterns and noise. But as he spoke, their campfire, which had been a bed of red embers, suddenly went out. Not faded, was extinguished, as if a blanket of cold had been thrown over it. It was here. The game was over. The story was no longer a story. It was at their door. And it had come for the price they had so carelessly offered. Mark, it smells like coins. They thought giving back the offering would satisfy it. They were wrong. You cannot bargain with a river, you cannot reason with a storm, and you cannot say to hunger that is the very fabric of a place. It wasn't the coins it wanted, it was the memory of the crime, the fear, the betrayal. It was tasting theirs. They got out. They never spoke of it publicly. Their audio file was deleted. But the old riverman told me one last thing. He said the whooper isn't one soul. It's a presence that attaches itself to acts of greed and betrayal in those woods. The cook was just one meal. Brennan, the foreman, was the next. The whooper doesn't just remember the crime, it encourages it. It plants the greed. So the story never really ends. It just waits for the next campfire to gut her out, for the next secret to be whispered, for the next hungry thought to cross a human mind. In the shadow of its pines, the whooper isn't out there, you see, it's in here.